The rain had been falling for nearly 6 hours when the elite military team reached the edge of the tropical island. Ahead of them stood a heavily fortified enemy outpost surrounded by steep cliffs, dense jungle, and violent ocean waves. Their mission was simple on paper but almost impossible in reality: reach the abandoned communications tower on the other side of the island, recover critical intelligence, and return before sunrise. Several previous teams had attempted similar missions during training exercises and failed. The terrain was brutal, the weather unpredictable, and the enemy defenses were designed to make a direct approach nearly impossible. As the soldiers gathered near the shoreline, their commander explained the plan. Nobody spoke when he finished. Then one of the soldiers quietly said, "That's suicide." Another shook his head and replied, "Nobody is getting through that jungle tonight." A female special operations soldier named Captain Elena Hayes stood several steps away, studying the distant tower through the rain. She had spent years training for difficult environments, but she was not known for talking about her abilities. When the commander asked for a volunteer to lead the advance team, Elena stepped forward. A few soldiers exchanged doubtful looks. One muscular veteran laughed under his breath. "Her," he said. "She won't make it halfway." Elena heard him but didn't react. She simply checked her equipment and asked the commander, "When do we move?" The commander looked at her seriously. "You understand what you're volunteering for?" Elena nodded. "Yes, sir." The team moved into the jungle shortly after midnight. Within minutes, the storm became worse. Rain hammered the leaves, visibility dropped to almost nothing, and the narrow trail disappeared beneath thick vegetation. The soldiers struggled to maintain formation, but Elena continued forward, carefully reading the terrain. She noticed footprints in the mud and immediately signaled the team to stop. A patrol had recently passed through the area. Instead of taking the obvious route, Elena guided the team through a narrow ravine that wasn't marked on their map. The skeptical soldiers began to realize that she wasn't guessing. She was observing. Every few minutes, she found another clue. Broken branches, fresh footprints, disturbed soil, or a faint light through the trees. Eventually, the team reached a steep cliff overlooking the enemy outpost. They could see guards moving around the tower below. The original plan required the entire team to descend together, but the commander realized the terrain had changed. A landslide had destroyed the safest route. "We're stuck," one soldier said. Elena looked toward the cliff and then toward a narrow path disappearing behind the rocks. "Not stuck," she replied. "There's another way." The soldiers followed her along the dangerous path until they reached a small opening overlooking the rear side of the compound. It was completely unguarded. The team moved through the opening and reached the communications building. Inside, they recovered the intelligence they needed. But just as they prepared to leave, an alarm suddenly sounded. Red lights flashed across the compound. The enemy had discovered their presence. The soldiers rushed toward the extraction route, but the path was blocked. Everyone began shouting directions at once. Elena remained calm. She quickly examined the surroundings and noticed an old drainage tunnel leading toward the shoreline. "This way," she shouted. The team followed her into the tunnel as the alarm continued behind them. The passage was narrow, flooded, and almost completely dark. One soldier became trapped when part of the tunnel collapsed behind him. Elena returned through the rising water and helped him free himself. "Leave me," he shouted. "Go." Elena shook her head. "Nobody gets left behind." She pulled him toward the others, and together they continued through the tunnel. When they finally emerged near the beach, the storm was still raging. Their extraction boat was waiting several hundred meters offshore, but the waves were too violent for a normal approach. The team leader looked at Elena and said, "We can't reach it." Elena looked toward the water and then noticed an old supply pier partially hidden beneath the waves. She remembered seeing it on an outdated map. "We can," she replied. The team followed the submerged path carefully until they reached the pier. One by one, they climbed aboard the extraction boat. As the boat pulled away from the island, everyone remained silent. They had completed a mission that had seemed impossible only hours earlier. The soldier who had laughed at Elena earlier finally approached her. His expression had completely changed. "I owe you an apology," he said. Elena looked at him and smiled slightly. "For what?" He shook his head. "For thinking you couldn't do it." Elena looked back at the dark island disappearing behind them. "You weren't the first person to think that," she said. "And you won't be the last." The commander overheard the conversation and smiled. "Then what keeps you going?" he asked. Elena paused before answering. "I don't try to prove people wrong. I just refuse to let their doubts decide what I'm capable of." The boat continued across the rough ocean as dawn slowly appeared beyond the clouds. The soldiers had started the mission believing the greatest obstacle was the enemy. By the end, they understood that the real obstacle had been their own assumption that the mission was impossible.